Good evening, everybody. I'm glad you're all here on a cold night. Maybe not as cold as Alberta. I see someone from Alberta on our screen. But it's cold enough for us. Tonight's kind of a special night because I am retiring from teaching. And this may be one of the last times that I do this in this setting with us. Retiring might not be exactly the right word. I'm not sure what word to put on it. I do know that when I left hospice work about 8 years ago, that my goal at that time was to give away what I had been given by my teachers and my patients. And it feels like that cycle has completed for me. And I don't know exactly what is next, but I'm opening myself up for whatever that might be. So whether that's traditional retirement, I don't know. And I don't know what that will mean for us as a Sangha. So much of this really depends on what the Sangha chooses to do, whether the Sangha has energy to move forward, whether the Sangha finds a different teacher, or maybe I come back and visit, or maybe the Sangha folds and goes away. I don't know. That's not up for me to decide. But I hope that I stay in contact. I love this Sangha. And we started this Sangha together. And it was a lovely, lovely thing to do. And I feel so lucky to have been able to be part of it and to have shared it with you. So thank you. Well, what I want to do in a few minutes is have an open discussion about that. Because there might be things that come up that we want to talk about. But before we do that, what I'd really like to do is offer you the most concise and direct description of the path of practice that I can. And hopefully that you can see yourself on that path. And maybe you can see yourself continuing on that path. And I trust all of you to practice well. You wouldn't be here if something didn't touch you about the contemplative life. And so I trust you to honor that and to nourish that and to let that flower in the way that I have. You'll do it your own way. You won't do it just like me, but it's the same seed. It's the same that I experienced a long time ago. And then I hope that you'll take what you hear from teachers or read in books, and that you'll filter it through your own wisdom. And then what you see to be true, you practice with diligence. If you know it to be true, live it in the world. Don't let it go by. Don't get to the end of your life with a regret. Okay, so let's talk about what this practice is and how we do it. How, when you touch that truth in you and you diligently want to practice, what do you actually do? I want to talk about it as two distinct steps, two stages of practice. And the first stage revolves around happiness, and the second stage revolves around Zazen, or sitting meditation. So I'm going to start with happiness first. An unhappy person has a very hard time progressing in practice. An unhappy person expects the world to change so that their unhappiness will go away. That's true of all of us. We all do that to some degree or another. And when we do that, what it does is it prevents us from seeing clearly our own true nature. We're so busy trying to make the world different that we can't look within. So the antidote to that is to practice happiness. And my teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, made practicing happiness a central part of what he taught when he came to the West. And I think he saw this about us in the West. He saw that we were suffering deeply and that we weren't going to make any progress on the path of practice until we knew how to touch happiness. And so he said, if there's not happiness in your practice, you're not practicing very well. A person who is unhappy is constantly disturbed. And they're fighting against life. And this is the opposite of where practice takes us. It takes us into harmony with life. So if we're unhappy, we're really 180 degrees off of where we want to go. So Thich Nhat Hanh brought with him from his chain of ancestors that taught him, he brought us some happiness practices. And I want to just mention a few of them. But most of the practices that have come through the Plum Village tradition are about generating happiness. So the very first one that we take up, and this is traditionally across Buddhist practice, is the practice of generosity. We have to take up the practice of generosity because we are wired to be self-centered. And particularly in our culture, we are wired to be self-centered. Greed is good. Remember that in that movie back in the 90s? That was the motto, greed is good. Get as much as you can. Prosperity gospel is taught by some of the most famous preachers around. The more you get, it means the more God loves you. So this is wired into us really strongly in the West. And we have to some way unwire that. And that is the practice of generosity. Instead of grabbing more and more for me, I learned to give more and more to you. And I thought grabbing more and more for myself was going to make me happy, and it did not. It just made me want more. But when I gave it a try to give to you, all of a sudden, I felt so much happier, so much more freedom. This is the first practice, generosity. The next practice is the mindfulness of daily living. We go through our lives generally unmindful of what's going on, unaware of what's going on. And this contributes to our unhappiness because usually unhappy people, like us at some degree, are looking for what's wrong in the world. We're all looking at politics these days and just pulling our hair out. Look, I have no more hair left. We're looking for what's wrong. But mindfulness practice is the antidote to this. Yes, there are things that are wrong in the world, definitely. But when we practice mindfulness, we begin to see that they are outnumbered by the things that are beautiful and good and wholesome and supportive. For instance, right in this part of the world, we just lived through some very cold weather. And we were so fortunate. When we got cold, we could turn on our heaters. When we got cold, we could take a hot shower. We could heat up a bowl of soup and warm ourselves. Many people in the world can't do this. But without mindfulness practice that says, I see, I feel, I touch. You put your hands under that warm water and you see the miracle of water flowing over your hands. You feel the gift that was given to us by the dinosaurs that died hundreds of millions of years ago to make the propane, to heat the water. There's a gift right there. Mindfulness practice shows us this. So it's an antidote to our unhappiness. The next practice has been particularly important to me, and that is the practice of using gathas, our little verses that we practice with, that remind us to come home to the present moment. When I first encountered these, I read them and I thought, oh, those are sweet little nursery rhymes. Those aren't really Zen practice. But Thich Nhat Hanh, when he became a novice monk at 16 years old, the first 2 years of his practice was spent memorizing gathas and caring for the water buffalo. That's how important it was. That's what his teacher gave him for the very first thing to do. He carried around a little book full of the gathas, and his job was to memorize them. And these gathas follow me around during my day. I have little sticky notes around to remind me. And they've followed me through the course of my practice. And I am so grateful. A gatha is a kind of koan that when you first read it, it makes no sense. It seems absolutely trivial, unimportant. But you come back to it over and over and over, and it unfolds, and you unfold with it. Every morning when I get up to meditate, I light the lamp, and I recite the gatha, lighting this lamp, offering this light to countless Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. The peace and joy I feel brighten the face of the earth. That meant nothing to me when I started, and that means everything to me now. And then the last of these elements of happiness that I want to mention, because we could talk about this for years, but I want to mention another one that's very, very important, and that is Sangha. Sangha is very important. We flow with the Sangha river. For instance, when we come in here tonight, our mind might be anywhere. Our mind could still be ruminating about the person who pulled out in front of us on the way over here, and we're still agitated. Our mind might be shooting ahead to the meeting we have tomorrow morning at work. And we can't get a hold of our happiness. But the minute we sit down with the Sangha loans us its solidity, and we can flow with the Sangha. And before we know it, we are moving in that realm of awakening as we all walk together around the room. We don't have to make our individual choices. We don't have to do it our way. We don't have to decide if this is good or bad. No, we just simply step forward together. Sangha has played an incredibly important role in my practice. There are times when my suffering was so great that all I could do was just flow with the Sangha. I couldn't bring my head above water except for that. And the Sangha saved my life. And when each of us comes to sit together, we're not doing this for ourselves. We're doing this for everybody. And when this Sangha gathers, we're not doing it for this Sangha. We're doing it for everybody out there. It's incredibly important. That's the happiness part. But the happiness part isn't enough. It doesn't take us all the way. And the reason it doesn't take us all the way is that it's still concerned with me. It's my happiness. And that's not the depth that Zen has for us. It has to be there, but it's not the depth yet. And so once we have the foundation of happiness, we're ready to take the next step, which is the practice of Zazen, the practice of sitting meditation. I don't think I really meditated in the way I'm going to talk about now for probably the first 10 years of my practice. It took that long. There were glimpses, there were moments, but to do it consistently, I think it took probably a decade or so. What happened for me mostly before that point was when I would do sitting meditation. It was a really nice, quiet time for me to nurse my rumination and make my plans and be mad at my 5th grade teacher and all that stuff that the human mind does. That's kind of how I filled my time on the cushion. It might sound familiar, because it's so difficult for us not to do that. It still happens. It still happens. But that's how I used it almost all the time, and I thought that was Zazen. But that's not really Zazen. Zazen is diligent observation of the present moment. Diligent observation of the present moment. It's not my personal plans. It's not my anger from the past. It's diligent observation of the present moment. When we practice Zazen, we are diligently aware of how my body is in the present moment. How's your body in this moment, right now? Zazen is diligent observation of how our mind is in the present moment. How's your mind right now? Zazen is diligent awareness of how our emotions are in the present moment. And Zazen is diligent awareness of how the environment is in the present moment, what seems like outside of me. Diligent. Coming back again and again and again to seeing how it is right now. Zazen answers the question, right now it's like this, right now it's like this, right now it's like this, over and over and over again. And we do that day after day, month after month, year after year. And when we do that, something very important happens. There's enough space for us to see our delusions come up. And boy, do we have them. Just filled with delusions, this human mind. We begin to see these habitual delusions, and we recognize that all along we have been mistaking these habitual delusions with me. I have this kind of chronic mental thought, and I think, that's me. I have that kind of chronic emotional activity. Oh, that's me, I think. I behave like this over and over and over again, and I think, that's me. But that's the delusion. That's not me. These actions are not true. These thoughts are not true. These emotions are not true. They are not me. Well, why would we do that? Why would we practice Zazen and see all these delusions and see that they're not me? Well, the really important thing that happens as we do that, as we see those delusions over and over and over and over again, is that every time we see them, they weaken. Every time that emotion comes up, that chronically comes up for you, maybe it's anxiety, maybe it's anger, who knows what it is? It's different for all of us. Every time we see that clearly and we don't believe that it's true, it weakens. And the next time it comes up, it's a little less vigorous. And the next time it comes up, it's a little bit weaker, and it's a little bit weaker. And every time one of those delusions weakens, we become more free. Those delusions move from being automatic triggers, I think this, I act that way, to, oh, I see this, but I still can't help myself from acting that way, to, I see this, but okay, I won't do that, to, I see this, and oh, isn't that interesting, to, I see this, and it has very little energy, and we're free. We're free. The really good news here is that we don't have to change ourselves. We don't have to make this into a big self-improvement project. We don't have to beat ourselves up because we think this or that, or we act this way or that way. We simply, in Zazen, come back diligently to the present moment, and we see what's true. And every time we see, it weakens and we get more free. We don't have to do anything else. To see is to transform. That's the power of Zazen. To see is to transform. That's as concise as I can give it. Let me review it really quickly here. So the first step, happiness. Happiness allows us to settle. And it's very important that we take the practices that were given to us by our ancestors, who have been doing this for millennia and have been testing out what works and what doesn't work. And they've passed to us what works. And so we do those practices, the practices I named and many others. We do them, and we find ourselves settling enough to be able to practice Zazen in an authentic way, which is to diligently see what's happening in the present moment. And when we do that, the delusions that we used to think were me begin to weaken and fade, and we become free. And as we become free, I hope that we turn around and we offer our freedom to the next generation so that they can become free. And we continue the chain that was handed to us from people we don't know their names, we don't know their faces, but there are about 100 generations since the time of the Buddha, and the Buddha wasn't the first one. And all those people have found their freedom, and all those people have turned around and given that freedom to the next generation so that it can continue. And that's my hope. That's my hope.